your teams.
Hell! It is Barner! It is Barner! And he's gone!
The Beavers are the national champions!
Brandon, a three-pointer out front. Hit it! Yes, he did!
His take.
Here's what I think.
Matt Bagley.
When I was just a regular person, didn't cover sports for a living, I thought that all fans were optimists by nature. They always would just assume my team is going to win the Super Bowl or the World Series or the national championship, and your team sucks. That's what I thought fan bases were all like, generally. But getting to know these fan bases, I believe that I'm not the only sports pessimist out there.
Talking local sports.
Are you a pessimist or an optimist when it comes to your favorite team? I am a pessimist. I tell you this, and I'm curious where you are as a fan, because I know where I was last night. And when Patrick Mahomes did the inevitable and came back and won in a way that only Patrick Mahomes can seemingly do, I was numb.
Southern Oregon Sports Talk with Matt Bagley. Presented by Medford BMW on 96.1 580 The Game.
Have you ever been to the Baseball Hall of Fame? I never have. I've been to baseball games all across the West Coast. 2 Padres games, an A's game, a Mariners game. If I had my way, and it's really not even my way, if my wife and I had our way, we would visit every baseball park in America. That's a dream vacation for us as a couple. I don't know if Cooperstown is in that dream vacation. I don't know if I'd ever go to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And it really comes down to the fact I don't know what the Baseball Hall of Fame really is. I want to hear from you. 541-630-4792. You can text me, or you can leave me a comment. Facebook.com/961thegame. What is the Baseball Hall of Fame? Is the Baseball Hall of Fame a museum where you learn about the history of baseball, the people who made the sport of baseball, the coaches, the players, the managers, the legends? If it's a museum, where are the steroids era guys? Barry Bonds today is looking at the Baseball Hall of Fame as something he may never reach. He was on the ballot for 10 years, couldn't get that threshold to get into Cooperstown, and now he's on the outside looking in, hoping that he can have another shot in 2023 in kind of a back avenue, back channel method. But it looks really grim. Looks like he's never going to be a Hall of Famer. The guy that hit more home runs than anybody. And he's not going to be a Hall of Famer. You wouldn't put that guy in the museum? So I don't think the Hall of Fame is a museum, which bums me out because I love museums. But you could say, well, the Hall of Fame is more of a society. It's more of a membership. It's like being on the honor roll in college. You have to have a good enough grade. You have to have a high enough character to be on the honor roll. Or it's like being you wear the green jacket in golf or the gold jacket in football. Right? You are voted as one of the best characters and leaders and heroes of your peers. But what about Ty Cobb? Ty Cobb was a racist, and they knew it then in the 20s when everybody was a racist. They had this guy singled out as he was worse than everybody else. What about Babe Ruth? Ruth was a womanizer. What about Joe DiMaggio? You could say the same thing about him. Marilyn Monroe by his side. Ted Williams was a bit of a jerk. Unfriendly. Fans couldn't ever get close to him. How about Mickey Mantle? He was a drunkard. I mean, you could go down the list with all the baseball heroes and icons for generations. All of them have character flaws. Almost all of them, anyway. Sure, there's a Hank Aaron. There are exceptions to the rule, right? But some of our heroes are jerks. They're terrible people. And yet they are in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So it's not a museum. And it's not a high society. It's not a club with exclusive membership based on your character, like an honor roll. What is the Baseball Hall of Fame? And I think that question and the answer to that question, the one I have, I don't know what it is the problem the Hall of Fame has right now. On one hand, you have voters who are willing to forgive the steroids era guys. And I think that in itself is fascinating because 10, 15 years ago, where were those voices? Where were those players banging the drum saying it's not a Hall of Fame without Barry Bonds? Where were the writers saying, hey, everybody did this, let's not blame Barry Bonds? I didn't hear that then. I heard a bunch of people complaining and a bunch of people lighting torches and pitchforks. I think we're in a better place now. I think it's a good thing that people have moved on, but it is worth pointing that out, right? Fandom has evolved in those 15 years, and so has our reaction to Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa and Rafael Palmeiro, and the list goes on. Right, I think that's part of it. Baseball is still figuring that out. You have a subset of the voters of the Baseball Hall of Fame that consider themselves evolved. They've moved on that issue. And then you have a subset of those voters that refuse to budge. Maybe they played the game. Maybe they were closest with the older players before Bonds' day that took a grievance to him using steroids. They didn't feel like the bennies they took in the 70s and the 80s, or the uppers they might have took in an earlier era. They didn't feel like those were comparable to Bonds boosting his physical gifts with performance-enhancing drugs. They felt like that was a step too far, a line you don't cross, and they held that against him. I think baseball has a problem. Are they a museum, or is it a honor roll? And I think until baseball figures out an answer to that question that enough of the voters can agree on, you're going to have deadlocks in the Hall of Fame voting like we had yesterday. The majority of people in America and a majority of pro baseball voters for the Baseball Hall of Fame think Barry Bonds should be a Hall of Famer. I believe Barry Bonds should be a Hall of Famer. If you take out the home runs he hit after we think he juiced, you take out the record center in 2000, you take out everything that happened after that, he still has over 400 dingers. He still has a bevy of stolen bases. He was still an iconic player for two franchises. Helped his teams get into the postseason, was the best hitter on those teams, some good teams. He's good enough to be a Hall of Famer. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. But I think for those two reasons, you have people that want to remove the steroids era from the history of the game, and you have people that want to exclude the steroids era players from the honor roll of baseball society. And either one I have issues with. Until they figure out what they want to be, I think we're going to end up with more Barry Bonds' boxed out of Cooperstown. But I want to hear from you. 541-630-4792. I know it's something people care about. I know it's something that, especially with Giants fans, that we have in Southern Oregon, I know that matters to you, right? You bought tickets. You had seats. You watched him bat. I've always used this analogy with baseball, this idea that one of the great alluring traits of baseball is I can buy a ticket to a game, and I'll take my wife, and we'll get some good seats on the first base side at Petco Park in San Diego, and maybe the Padres are good, maybe they aren't. But I can always point out a couple players. Like this past year on our honeymoon, we were down in San Diego, and we had the opportunity to go watch an A's-Padres game. And neither of those teams made the postseason this year. But I got to say, we get to watch Manny Machado, who I think is one of the best hitters and infielders in the game right now. We got to watch Fernando Tatis Jr., who I think is incredibly exciting, incredibly just inspiring. The passion, the intensity that he plays with, it's infectious. You want to watch him do his thing. You want to watch him smash something 500 feet in the air and then flip his bat into the clouds. That's amazing. It's fun. It's electrifying, right? We also got to watch Seth Brown, who played for the A's that night we went. And that was special for me because not only have I interviewed Seth on this radio show, but I have a lot in common with him. We went to North Medford. I think we were a year apart at North Medford. We both went to small colleges. He went to Lewis and Clark State. I went to Oregon Tech. They play each other every spring. And while I have career aspirations to go from small town Medford on to hopefully bigger things someday, Seth Brown is living those same aspirations. So I've always rooted for Seth. I've always enjoyed following Seth. The fact that I got to watch him in a major league game, that's something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. The rest of my life. That's baseball at its best. And there are millions of baseball fans that can say they bought a ticket to watch Barry Bonds, and they didn't complain about it. They weren't upset about it. They don't look back on it after the fact 10, 15 years later and think, oh, I wish I would have never bought a ticket to watch that cheater. No. They look back and they say, hey, he smashed one further than I've ever seen anybody smash one at Yankee Stadium. They say he drew an intentional walk with the bases loaded. And nobody batted an eye. Nobody blinked. Nobody thought twice about it. And they'll say he hit more home runs than anybody that ever played the game. Now, I don't think the home run record for him is fair. He probably roided up. I don't doubt that. But I do think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I think he was a Hall of Fame caliber player, and the voters screwed this one up, just like they've screwed a lot of the steroids era guys up in this Hall of Fame voting over the past decade. I want to hear from you. 541-630-4792. What is the Baseball Hall of Fame? What is it trying to be? What should it be? We know, we're fans. To me, it should be a museum. It should be a place where you go to study the greats and the history-breaking moments of the game. You go to learn about Pete Rose, the good and the bad. You go to learn about Barry Bonds, the good and the bad. You go to learn about the beautiful parts of the game, the Ty Cobbs, the Babe Ruths, the Joe DiMaggios, and learn about the ugly parts of the game. Learn about where the game has gotten better. And learn about where the game might not have gotten better. The Baseball Hall of Fame, it should be a museum. You should have the steroids era guys in there. Now, you don't consider them the greatest. You don't have to say Barry Bonds was the greatest player ever. Alex Rodriguez was the greatest player ever. You don't have to say that. Just put him in the hall. Enough of this. 541-630-4792. The other thing, and I'm rambling, start of the show, but I have said before, I don't think that the best voters are voting for the Baseball Hall of Fame. And here's what I mean by that. I think that there are a lot of old, retired baseball writers, and this is not me trying to be ageist. I love older people. I connect with you because a lot of you listen to my radio show. But I think there is a problem with a lot of former writers that don't follow baseball every day and certainly have not thought about what baseball is in 2022, and they still get a ballot every year. Case in point, I've mentioned this story before. I know one Hall of Fame voter personally, one person that has a Baseball Hall of Fame vote. And they have not been on a Major League Baseball beat, meaning they have not actively followed a team in their coverage for decades. Decades. But decades ago, they followed a Major League Baseball team. And decades ago, they developed opinions on that Major League Baseball team and a player on that baseball team. And they've made it their crusade for decades to grind an axe against a particular player. Is it fair that they do that when they haven't covered the game in 30, 40 years? I don't think so. And I don't think personal agenda should factor in at all. What I see happening with the Hall of Fame is a lot of these voters look at a guy like Barry Bonds and they say, he was mean to me when I met with him. He was standoffish. He was off-putting. I wanted an interview. He wouldn't give it to me. I just wanted him to talk with me for 5 minutes. He wouldn't give it to me. I agree that's not fair. I agree that's not fun. I've been in that seat. I can't count how many times I've tried to reach out to a player or a coach and been blown off. It's really frustrating. It's so aggravating because, like, I just want to say, hey, I'm not trying to trap you. I'm not trying to ruin you, right? This is not 2020. This is not 60 Minutes. It's a sports radio show. Just give me 5 minutes of your time. My listeners will love it. They already love you. Everybody's going to have a good time. And they'll blow me off. Do I grind that axe for 30 years and talk about how so-and-so is the worst person on earth? No, because I'm a human being, right? These writers, they aren't thinking like human beings. They're thinking like this is the worst, most egregious thing someone can possibly do. And they hold these grudges for years and years and years, and I don't think it's fair. Barry Bonds shouldn't be excluded from the Hall of Fame because he wasn't friendly with a bunch of writers. And that's what we have here. They didn't like him, and they hide behind the character clause to come up with reasons why he shouldn't be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So that doesn't sit right with me. 541-630-4792, or you can leave a comment at Facebook, facebook.com/961thegame. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about something a little happier here. Conference Championship weekend coming up right here on the Game Sunday, and, of course, on the television as well. But I know for me personally, if the wife needs any errands done, I'm turning my radio on. I don't want to miss a snap. Let's talk about these games. Let's talk about who wins. Do the Bengals have a shot? I told you Monday, don't talk yourself out of this team. Don't tell yourself they can't win. But then I heard what Joe Burrow told the media this week, and it doesn't leave me feeling good about the Bengals. I'll tell you why. Southern Oregon Sports Talk, presented by Medford BMW. 96.1, 580 The Game.
It's back. Abby's legendary Foremost Pizza features 4 of our most popular pizzas, all together in a special square shape. It's a special pizza in a special shape at a very special price. But hurry, before the Abby's Foremost disappears again. 25% pepperoni, 25% Hawaiian, 25% cheese, and 25% Abby's Special. This pizza is 100% amazing. With hand-rolled dough and toppings to the edge, the Foremost has something for everyone. Add a fresh salad, piping hot breadsticks, or garlic knots, and you'll be living the good life. When you dine at Abby's, you're supporting local schools, charities, and events. We're family-owned and a little old-fashioned. Community means everything to us. If a child in your family is celebrating a birthday soon, let's throw a party together. With free balloons, a free t-shirt, and a special birthday discount. We've been the go-to place for birthday parties for nearly 60 years. Head to Abby's.com or visit one of our clean, comfortable parlors. Delivery, takeout, or dine-in. Abby's, a legendary pizza tradition.
It's time. The countdown is on for your new ride for the new year. From the new Hyundai Medford. New Hyundai SUVs. 2022 Konas, Tucson, or all new Santa Fe. Over 20 to choose from. All with 1.9% financing for 60 months. Plus, new Hyundais come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile Hyundai Advantage warranty. Or how about new to you? We have a great selection of used vehicles, too. BMWs, Fords, Chevys, Toyotas, Nissan, GMC, and Ram trucks. Or maybe you just want cash. Well, we want your car. And yes, we pay cash. The green stuff. Dollar bills. Yes, we can pay you now. Bring it in and let's talk. New to you. Or cash for your car. Let's get you on a new ride this new year at Hyundai Medford. HyundaiMedford.com. 1.9% financing for 60 months on approved credit by Hyundai Motor Finance to well-qualified buyers. May not be combined with other offers. Offer ends 1/31/2022. See dealer for details.
Hey, America, we need to have a little talk. We've got more food in our country than we know what to do with. Food at the grocery store and food in the vending machines, fast food, health food, and seafood. We've got so much food that anything people don't buy, we just throw out. Yet 17 million kids in America struggle with hunger. That ain't right. Luckily, the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks has volunteers gathering excess food and getting it to hungry kids. They're kind of like food angels. Yeah, I made that up. It's kind of catchy. Hello, people. This isn't rocket science. We could solve hunger today. To start, become a food angel yourself by supporting Feeding America in your local food bank at feedingamerica.org. That's a website, duh. We can't do it without your help. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Southern Oregon Sports Talk with Matt Bagley. Talking local sports. Weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. on 96.1 580 The Game.
Did you hear what Joe Burrow said about Arrowhead Stadium? Now, Arrowhead Stadium is the loudest venue in the NFL. Of that, I have no doubt. Burrow, he hasn't played there yet. He doesn't know. And the Bengals starting QB said, quote, "It gets way louder in the SEC than in any of these NFL stadiums." End quote. I like the Bengals. I'm rooting for the Bengals on Sunday. I'd love for that underdog story to continue 2 more weeks and keep going all the way to Super Bowl Sunday. But if Joe Burrow thinks that he can walk into Arrowhead and treat it just like he's at an Alabama game or an Auburn game or a Florida game, he's in for a rude awakening. Those fans are going to let him hear it. Now, I don't think home field advantage is the be-all, end-all in the NFL, but I bet if they do a decibel meter at Arrowhead on Sunday, it's going to set records. You do not want to give those fans extra fuel, and that's what he did. I think it's a dumb mistake. I think it's a young mistake, and after they lose this game, he'll probably learn from it and go, I will never do that again. But for now, Joe Burrow made the mistake, and now he's got to deal with it. I'm rooting for the Bengals. That comment makes me feel a little less strongly in their ability to win. I already thought they were going to be the underdog on Sunday anyway, but now I'd probably take Kansas City at an even better line. I want to hear from you. 541-630-4792. Who are you rooting for on Sunday, and who do you think wins? Because, again, I know that can be different sometimes. I know that one can contrast the other. I'm rooting for the Bengals. I think Kansas City wins. I'm rooting for the Niners. But L.A., they got some stars. And I think they're due. I think the Rams are due. Like, there is an argument to be made here. Sean McVay never, ever beats Kyle Shanahan. Gets swept by the Niners every year, even when the Niners are bad. Loses to the Niners in big games, and the narrative is, well, Sean McVay can't beat him. Well, Kyle Shanahan knows Sean McVay's stuff too well, and he can't do it. Or he overthinks things. Or when he had Jared Goff, it was, well, Jared Goff can't win against the Niners. Now you have Matt Stafford, and Matt Stafford hasn't beaten the Niners, and the narrative is still Sean McVay can't beat the 49ers. They had a 17-point lead when they lost to the Niners in Week 18. 17-point lead at halftime, and they lost that football game. I kind of want to pick the Rams by a ton on Sunday because I think that's the message all week. You blew a 17-point lead. Don't do it again. Get on these guys and stay on these guys. Like, they had a 20-3 lead over the Bucs. They had a 17-0 lead over the 49ers. This team is good enough to blow people out. They just haven't done so. I think there's a chance Sunday they do it. Now, I'm rooting for the Niners. I'd love to talk about 49er football for 2 more weeks. I know it's a team you care about locally. I know it's a team that have a lot of great, fun, compelling players that are easy to root for. But I could see the argument the Rams have a big blowout on Sunday. So I want to know, who are you rooting for and who do you think wins? Leave me a comment here on the Facebook live stream, facebook.com/961thegame, or chime in with a text message, 541-630-4792. How about this question? If you were a Baseball Hall of Fame voter, who would you vote for? And how would you vote? I ask that question because there is a certain kind of person that is a Baseball Hall of Fame voter. You have to be a baseball writer. And you don't have to be a current baseball writer, so you could just be a former baseball writer. But you have to, at some point, worked for a major publication recognized with a credential by Major League Baseball. And so there are a handful of sports radio hosts or opinion columnists. There are a handful of current beat writers. There are a lot of former beat writers that used to cover a team on a beat that no longer do so. And they get a say in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I don't get a say in the Baseball Hall of Fame. You don't get a say in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I want to know if that was reversed, if it was a more open vote, who would you vote for? If they let you and I vote, who would you vote for? The writers don't like Barry Bonds, and I think it's because they didn't like him as a player. They tried to interview him, and he wouldn't interview with anybody. They wanted to get close to him. They wanted to be friends with him because that's what they do. They get friendly. They get buddy-buddy with these players because that helps their jobs. They come up with stories. They build connections. They can write a piece 10 years down the line about how I knew Barry and nobody else did. And here's some heartwarming, endearing piece about some humanizing aspect of his life that only I, the writer, got to know. Well, Barry Bonds didn't let anyone do that. He never opened up to anyone about that, and that's his right as a human being. He doesn't have to. He didn't have to at the time. He doesn't have to now. It makes him look like a jerk. It makes him look a little unfriendly. As a sports radio guy, I can see where the writers would be a little burned by it because I've tried to interview people that have flatly rejected me the same way Bonds did, all these writers, all the times over the years. But I don't have a Hall of Fame vote. And even if I did, I'd still vote him in. Who cares if he's a jerk? Who cares if he's not friendly with the media? They don't put him in because they have an axe to grind. I just look at the baseball resume. Most home runs of all time, and if you take out all the ones he got when he was supposedly juiced, it's still a ton. Almost 500 dingers before the year 2000. I think that's good enough for the Hall of Fame. I want to hear from you. Who would you vote for? I'd vote for Barry Bonds. I'd vote for Roger Clemens. I'd vote for Pete Rose. Here's what I don't understand about Pete Rose being out of the Hall of Fame. Is he a bad guy? Yes. Yes. I've never met him personally. I've never spoken with him. Everyone I know that has interviewed Pete Rose in my job, in my seat, has said Pete Rose is a scuzzball. And I've read so many stories over the years, and I've seen the same videos that you have, all the television appearances, all the interviews. I get a really bad vibe from Pete Rose, the person. But Pete Rose, the baseball player, there's nothing I can say to discredit that. There's nothing I can say that says the all-time hits leader in baseball and a guy that was known for his hard-working, persevering mentality, Mr. Hustle, that guy, the guy that will run the bases and barrel over catchers in an all-star game, that guy, there's nothing I can say about that guy not being a Hall of Fame player. Of course he's a Hall of Fame player. He should be a Hall of Fame player. And further, the reason that Pete Rose is not in the Hall of Fame might seem obvious. He gambled. That was bad. That was a no-no. But I think we've evolved as a society. I think we've reached a point as a society where gambling is not the taboo that it was 30 or 40 years ago. And sure, you can say, Matt, even then he crossed the line. I agree. Don't gamble on your teams. Don't gamble on your teams. Don't gamble on the games. I get that. But do we have evidence that he threw games? Do we have evidence that he caused his team to lose so that he could cash in and benefit? If he bet on his team to win and they won, I don't see what the problem is. In a society where everybody's got something on these games nowadays, you can't tell me that some player doesn't have a brother or a family member or a friend betting for them. I'm sure they do. I'm sure it happens. Heck, what about fantasy sports? How many times have we seen a player say, I really hope you miss that kick, opponent? Or how many times have we seen a player say, hey, I hope you make that kick, or I hope you hit this home run, or I hope you have a great night, even if they're playing against the guy in real life, because in their fantasy league, he's on their fantasy team. I've heard that story so many times over the years, it's numb to me now. Fantasy sports, gambling, it's not as big of a problem as it was 40 years ago. I think we're moving on with Bonds, most of us. 65% voted for Barry to get in the Hall yesterday. That wasn't good enough, but that's still a majority. And I think a similar number would vote Pete Rose in. A similar number would be ready to move on with Pete Rose. At least I am. I'd vote Bonds and Rose. Who would you vote for? I want to hear from you. 541-630-4792. I'm running late. I got to call for a break because my next guest is waiting. Joey Mack is going to jump on the phone line in a minute, and we're going to talk about that Oregon men's basketball team. They pulled off something 2 weeks ago that no one in the history of the Pac-12 Conference or Pac-10 or Pac-8 had ever done. They beat 2 top 5 teams in one weekend. 2 weeks later, they lose to Colorado at home. Is the sky falling? Is all that goodwill gone forever? Joey Mack, he covers that team, broadcasts them on the radio. The voice of the Oregon men's basketball team joins me next. He'll share his thoughts on Southern Oregon Sports Talk, presented by Medford BMW.
If you're looking for a deal on a set of wheels, Butler's got your truck.
It's Butler Ford's model year closeout sale going on right now. Hi, I'm Joel Nickerson, sales manager at Butler Ford, and right now is the time to really save at Butler Ford. All, and I mean all, remaining brand new 2021 F-150s, Escapes, EcoSports, Edges, and Mustangs all have 0% financing for 36 months, and most have rebates as well. You don't want to miss this opportunity. Plus, if you're looking for great used vehicles, we got those too. Used trucks, SUVs, sedans. We've got Fords, GMCs, Mazdas, Volkswagens, and Dodges. Over 40 on site and more on the way coming in every day. Great pricing on awesome vehicles. Butler's got your truck. Big or small, we got them all. Right here in Ashland, exit 19. Check us out at butlerford.com.
0% financing for 36 months on approved credit by Ford Credit Finance to well-qualified buyers. May not be combined with other offers. Offer ends 1/31/2022. See dealer for details.
Have you ever started a project and found you just didn't have the right tools? Well, that's one reason Knife River Materials created their building materials store. Although they were created for professionals, by professionals, they also provide tools and supplies for the do-it-yourselfer. Stop by our Central Point Knife River Building Materials store today. You'll find finishing tools, floor sealers, epoxies, you name it, they have it. Plus, they can help you order concrete, providing information on using colored concrete. If you're thinking of using colored concrete, you can't beat the quality and consistency of Knife River's liquid color process. And now the store is selling a variety of pick-up-and-go rock products. Remember, no one can match Knife River Materials' heritage of service to Southern Oregon. If it comes from Knife River, you know it's the best.
My reason why is community.
My reason why is leadership.
My reason why is to inspire others.
Why do thousands of teenagers here in Oregon participate in high school sports and activities?
My reason why is friendship.
Their reasons are as diverse as the students themselves. But the one thing they all share is the opportunity to have fun and learn important life lessons. Lessons like supporting their community, learning how to be a leader, and building lifelong friendships.
My reason why is defying expectations.
Is there a grade school or middle school student in your family? Then encourage them to participate in a sport or activity when they go to high school.
My reason why is to make a change in the world.
This message presented by the NFHS and the Oregon School Activities Association.
Southern Oregon Sports Talk with Matt Bagley. Talking local sports. Weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. on 96.1 580 The Game.
All right. Jumping in on another segment, Southern Oregon Sports Talk, presented by Medford BMW. I have Joey Mack on the phone line. He is the play-by-play voice of the Oregon men's basketball team. I want to talk about those Ducks because they played last night, and they surprised me last night. I'm sure a lot of fans were shocked, too. But let's start with something that I know is close to the heart. Joey played baseball in high school. He covers the Oregon baseball team year-round. He's a diehard baseball fan. How do you feel about the Baseball Hall of Fame, Joey?
Well, boy, I mean, that's a big, loaded question. I mean, you know, I got a few opinions. I think that the biggest one of mine is that I've always been of the opinion that there are different eras in baseball. You know, there's the dead ball era. There's an era where the mound was a different height. And then there's the steroid era, and there's a lot of other eras in between all of those. And I think that you have to look at the game of baseball in terms of those eras and generations. And I think that once you do that, there can be two opinions. One, it's either, well, some eras are because of cheating and whatever. And then there are other eras or other thoughts that the eras are just part of the game. I'm the person that thinks the eras are just part of the game, and I'm also the person that thinks that the Baseball Hall of Fame is first and foremost a museum of the history of baseball. And sure, if you're in the Hall of Fame, you deserve to be there. Well, I actually think that there are more people now that aren't in the Hall of Fame, and those have become a bigger thing of discussion. Right. I'd rather that the Baseball Hall of Fame be truly a museum of the history of the game. And if it is that, then people like Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds and a lot of others probably deserve in the Hall of Fame. And I really believe that the Hall of Fame should be a museum of the history of the game. And I think that it's safe to say that for everybody who's my age, you grew up in the steroid era. Those were the people that you rooted for in baseball. Well, if that's the case, then those people should be in the Hall of Fame, and the Hall of Fame should be telling the story of the entire game, not just the pieces of the game that we've deemed okay. Because meanwhile, while the commissioner of the league during the steroid era is in the Hall of Fame, a lot of the players aren't. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point. Like I brought up earlier, I don't know what the Hall of Fame is. I don't know if it is a museum or if it's an honor roll, right, where you have to have a certain character and you have to have a certain standard to get in. Because there are some characters in the Hall of Fame, your Ty Cobbs, your Mickey Mantles, that I don't think people think of as good people. But Barry Bonds isn't in.
But why does the Hall of Fame have to be one or the other?
Right.
Why can't it be an honor roll and a museum of the history of the game? That's my opinion. I think that it should be – I really believe that it should be all of those things. It should tell the entire history of the sport. I think that the Hall of Fame, because of the – you know, what we as people who have not been to those Hall of Fames think of it as is an honor roll. But then when you actually go to those Hall of Fames, it's a museum. I mean, I think that it can be both of those things is my opinion. So – you know, are you going to recognize Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens in a way in the Hall of Fame? Yes. Now, there are going to be people listening to this saying, well, isn't Barry Bonds' home run, record-breaking ball, bat, or I don't even remember exactly what is in the Hall of Fame, but something like that is in the Hall of Fame. Doesn't that account for the museum aspect of it? Well, to an extent. But, you know, if you really want to have this argument round and round, in my opinion, as a baseball guy, then there's probably an argument to be made for Barry Bonds pre-steroids, right? And even if he didn't take steroids, I don't know. I'm not Barry Bonds, but I think that the evidence is such that he and a lot of others probably did, right? We all kind of know that. Well, there is an argument to be made for him to be in there as an individual, even without the steroids. I mean, he had such a great career regardless of everything else that went on. So I don't know. We could go round and round in circles on this, Matt. I think that this is one of many topics that I have perspective on just as a sports fan. I talk to a lot of people who have played the games and who have coached the games. And, you know, I kind of think that that's where it is. And I also think that if you're going to be voting on who should be in the Hall of Fame, I think that probably the people that are in the Hall of Fame should be voting on it, not just the Baseball Writers Association of America.
Thank you, Joey. That is something that I believe from the depths of my heart. And can I just say, I know it's not what you talk about for a living, right? You cover the Ducks. You work for the Ducks. That's why I bring you on every week. But I'm really glad that I had an opportunity to hear you speak about something that I know you're extremely passionate about.
Well, thanks. I try to be. I mean, I think that if you have a passion for sports, you have a passion for sports. I mean, and I also think that there are a lot of opinions that are valid and a lot of opinions that should be heard. And at the end of the day, the leaders of the various sports, meaning the players and the coaches, should be the ones that have the biggest voices, because they're the ones that are out there doing it, and they're the ones that are talking to each other and living it. And so I do think one of the cruxes of the issue for me is really, I think the people that are in the Hall of Fame, in the various Hall of Fames, should have a vote in who gets in to join them. It shouldn't just be, the journalists that cover them. Now, do I think that the journalists that cover them and cover so many different elements should have a voice in it? Yeah, I actually do, because I think those are the storytellers and those are the people that know so much more about the sport than the average fan. But really, journalists are I think at the core, they're just fans of the game. I think that it should be all of those parties that have a say in who gets into these various museums and halls of fame.
Yeah. Yeah. He's Joey Mack. I'm guessing, just like Joey doesn't have a vote on that either, but he's got some great insights. No vote, but great insights, great opinions. I want to make sure I don't run out of time with you, Joey. I want to switch gears. Oregon men, tough one last night, especially after what fans got accustomed to over the past couple weeks. Do you panic after that loss? How do you react?
I think it's twofold. One, it's Colorado has kind of been the kryptonite to Oregon, and so it doesn't, I think, come as a surprise. But two, the surprise maybe a little bit, and I think, Coach Altman would certainly say this, that it felt like the Ducks had figured some things out with their offensive ball movement, their shot selection. They were shooting over 42% from three over the course of their last 5 games, and that didn't happen, in this game. And I think that it's a lot of things that went into that loss. But to me, the biggest is getting out-rebounded. And Dana Altman said at postgame, look, I mean, you just can't get outworked the way that the Ducks did on the glass and then just in general, particularly at home. So, what does it mean? What do I take away from it? I think that the Ducks can still be probably one of the best teams in the conference. Can they be the 4th best team in the conference? Because to me, if you're the 4th best team in the conference, I think you are absolutely in the NCAA tournament. I can't see, even after UCLA smoked Arizona last night, I just can't see the committee saying, okay, if Arizona and UCLA are 2 seeds and USC is going to be a 4, 5, 6, whatever USC ends up being, maybe a 7, I don't know. I just can't see the committee saying, okay, yeah, that's all the Pac-12 has to offer. I think if you're the 4th best team in the league, you're still going to make the tournament. Does this loss hurt? 100% it does. But can the Ducks avenge this loss in Boulder? Yes, I know Oregon has not won in Boulder during Dana Altman's tenure as the head coach. Yeah, I still think that they can avenge the loss. So I think it's a learning moment. And if the Ducks needed to have that learning moment come at the end of January, then so be it. They need to rebound better. They probably need to keep their bigs out of foul trouble because both Kepnang and Dante had 3 fouls early in the second half. If they can do those things, I still think Oregon's a really good team and a team that can make a long run in postseason play.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes down to selection. When you have 2 top 5 wins, I think it's really farcical to imagine the committee overlooking you.
I agree. I mean, I don't know. I think that there's a lot to unpack there. I think that the metrics will end up working out in Oregon's favor because so much is made of the net ranking, and rightfully so. The measurements based on your schedule and your wins and the opponent's schedule and all those things. I think the metrics will end up working out in the Pac-12's favor because you're going to have, I think, at least 4 teams that are clearly inside the field of 68 based on the metrics. Now, the field of 68 isn't just 1 through 68 in the net rankings. It's more than that. It ends up being, which conferences have a steal of a bid, right? Like which one ends up with a bid that gets stolen because, a team wins their conference tournament that maybe shouldn't be in there. there's so many different things that factor into it. But I do believe the Pac-12 is at minimum a 4-team league in the NCAA tournament. And if it doesn't go that way, then who am I to say otherwise? But I will also say, Matt, I do think that it ends up mattering how many the West Coast Conference gets in. You know, St. Mary's a team that beat Oregon by 12 points, and St. Mary's in the last bracketology was a team that was slightly above Oregon in the tournament projections. And that was after Oregon had those 2 top 5 wins on the road. You know, I think it will matter how many West Coast Conference teams get in. Does BYU end up being a tournament team after Oregon lost to BYU in Portland? You know, I think St. Mary's, BYU, those are just a couple teams to kind of keep tabs on for Oregon's sake.
Definitely. Yeah, that's going to be a question going forward. Joey Mack asking that question, talking with me right now on Southern Oregon Sports Talk, presented by Medford BMW, 96.1, 580 The Game. Last thing for you, Joey, off season for the football team. Are you 100% on the hoops train right now, or do you have any football coverage going on?
Well, I mean, honestly, yeah, we have football coverage, and in a week it's National Signing Day, so we're planning for about 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. live stream with all of the coaches, all of Dan Lanning's staff coming into the Country Financial studio and talking with us and breaking down the film of all of the different recruits. That's what we're planning for right now. And then we'll still have Duncan Sider talking about all the different recruits, and that's still on the horizon. But there's no doubt that basketball is on the forefront of my mind. But I should say that, you know, baseball right now is on the simmer burner. Baseball is about to go to the low burner because the first official practice is Friday. And then baseball is going to be on that power burner on the front of your stove here before too long, because we're about a month away from opening day for Oregon baseball, which I'm really excited about. That's a team that's generating a lot of buzz right now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I noticed Oregon State gets in the top 25, and Beaver fans are excited about that. I didn't find Oregon in the polls, and I was surprised by that, Joey. Are you surprised by that?
Well, it depends which poll you're looking at. You know, there's 6 major, 7 major, depending on how you look at it, college baseball polls. To me, there's 6. There's 6 major college baseball polls. Oregon has shown up in the top 25 of a few of them, but it depends on which one you're looking at. I think look, Oregon lost its entire rotation and its probably 3 best hitters to professional baseball. So I think that there are some things that need to be proved by this Oregon team. You know, how good can Josh Kasevich be? How good can Anthony Hall be? How good can Tanner Smith be? They're kind of the leaders of the group offensively now. How good can a guy like Isaac Aon be? How good can Andrew Mosiello be? Can Colby Summers continue to do what he was doing in the back end of the bullpen? That's kind of the question mark on the pitching. And then the depth matters. You know, Mark Wasikowski talked with us this week, and he said, well, you know, I think that we have, from the early goings, at least, of the way things are looking, we have the potential to be a Pac-12 competitor. If you're competing in the Pac-12, then you're going to do some potentially really special things. But, you know, Oregon earned the right to host a regional last year. They didn't win that regional, ran into a little bit of a buzzsaw with Logan Marceau and that LSU team. But I think that Oregon has the potential to host a regional again and compete for a Pac-12 title, because, again, if you're competing for a Pac-12 title, you're going to be one of the best teams in the country. But now the Ducks have to go out and prove it, and there are certainly some unproven pieces on that roster.
Unproven, but they've got potential to win a Pac-12 title. That's from Joey Mack. Joey is going to cover those Oregon baseball games in the spring. Right now, he's behind the mic for men's basketball and always hosting Duck Insider, 3 o'clock every day right here. Thanks for your time, Joey.
Always appreciate it, Matt. Thanks, buddy.
Okay, Joey Mack. Let's wrap hour number 1 next. Bonds doesn't get in the hall. Here's who does. And here's my issue with it. Southern Oregon Sports Talk, presented by Medford BMW, 96.1, 580 The Game.
Yes, Miss Tubbs. No problem. I'll call someone about the plumbing.
One of Beatrice's properties needs a new superintendent.
The custodial team is not...
Someone with handyman superpowers and a concierge alter ego.
Does anyone know any good electricians near Parkville?
Indeed can help her hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Instant Match instantly connects you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your sponsored job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
It's time for something new. The first great event of the new year at Kia Medford. Now, be the first to purchase a new 2022 Soul or 2022 Kia Sportage and save with 0.9% financing for 60 months. All new Kias come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile Kia Assurance Warranty. We have lots on the lot and lots of new vehicles arriving daily. Plus, we have over 35 quality used vehicles ready for you to see right now. Let's trade your keys for a new ride today. BMWs, Fords, Chevys, Toyotas, Nissan, GMC, and Ram trucks. Or maybe you just want to sell what you have for cash. We can do that too. Bring it in and let's talk new, used, or cash for your vehicle at Kia Medford's first great event of the new year. Going on now. Corner of Crater Lake Highway and Vinas Road. KiaMedford.com.
0.9% financing for 60 months on approved credit by Kia Finance to well-qualified buyers. May not be combined with other offers. Offer ends 1/31/2022. See dealer for details.
Fast, reliable internet is essential for online education, remote work, healthcare visits, and our quality of life. Do you live in a rural area and have slow internet speeds? Funds are on the way to improve broadband services in rural Oregon. Jackson and Josephine counties need your help to make that happen. Please take an online survey at jcor.us. It takes about 2 minutes. That's jcor.us.
Southern Oregon Sports Talk with Matt Bagley. Talking local sports. Weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. on 96.1 580 The Game.
Southern Oregon Sports Talk is presented by Medford BMW. I've got a couple of minutes. I want to look back at some of the things we talked about with Joey Mack, Ducks play-by-play guy, and set the scene for next hour, where I'm going to talk about that Oregon football offseason with ScoopDuck.com's Justin Hopkins. Till then, though, I have a couple more questions to iron out. Barry Bonds doesn't get into the Hall of Fame. 65% of the voters thought he would, thought he should, but that wasn't enough. Threshold was 75%. You know who did get into the Baseball Hall of Fame yesterday? David Ortiz. Now, I don't have anything against David Ortiz. I love his story. Ball player from the Caribbean and finds his way in the majors, has a part in a couple World Series teams. That's an incredible story, but he has the same asterisk that Barry Bonds does. In fact, you could argue his asterisk is bigger and bolder. Bonds was accused of using PEDs, but it's never been proven. Ortiz tested positive, and Ortiz is in the Hall of Fame. So why isn't Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame? Is it PEDs? If so, it's not a consistent rubric, right? Like, if one player can get in with PEDs and another player can't, why? Were they a better player? Was David Ortiz a better player than Barry Bonds? No, right? Like, no one thinks so. Ortiz was a DH. Bonds was an outfielder. Ortiz was slow. Bonds was a stolen bases machine. And I'm talking about pre-steroids Bonds. A 40-40 guy. 40 homers, 40 steals. When did David Ortiz ever do that? Ever come close to that? Of course Barry Bonds is a better player. But Barry isn't in the Hall. Not because of PEDs, but because of personality. Big Papi is on MLB Network. Big Papi has friends in the media. They like him. They get along with him. They vouch for his character. Nobody likes Barry Bonds. Nobody can vouch for his character, and he's on the outside looking in when it comes to Cooperstown. Personally, that doesn't sit right with me. Maybe it does with you. Let me know. 541-630-4792. Boy, Joey Mack was fired up about that topic. Like, I don't normally go baseball heavy on the show, but when you have something big like this, like every year, Hall of Fame vote, I always talk about it. When you have something big like this, you got to talk about it. And Joey, he is 10 times the baseball fan that I am. Grew up in the Bay Area, grew up a Giants fan, grew up a Barry Bonds fan, because we're 1 year apart. We are both young imprinted with a love of baseball during that era no one will speak of now. But I loved Joey just letting it out, just telling us everything on his mind, everything in his heart. And I agree with almost everything he said. The Hall of Fame should be a museum, and it's not. It's an honor roll, and they don't even get the honor roll right. There's all sorts of guys on the list who shouldn't be on, and some guys that aren't on the list that should be on. So anyway, hour number 2 is going to be different. I taped a podcast with ScoopDuck.com's Justin Hopkins. We do that every week. It's called Scoop Duck and Hi-Fi, and I'm going to share that podcast with you in the second hour of this radio show. We're talking college football, Dan Lanning, talking about guys transferring out of the Oregon program, talking about how Oregon can recover from that, and how Oregon can recruit under a brand new coaching staff. That's next.
It's back. Abby's legendary Foremost Pizza features 4 of our most popular pizzas, all together in a special square shape. It's a special pizza in a special shape at a very special price. But hurry, before the Abby's Foremost disappears again. 25% pepperoni, 25% Hawaiian, 25% cheese, and 25% Abby's Special. This pizza is 100% amazing. With hand-rolled dough and toppings to the edge, the Foremost has something for everyone. Add a fresh salad, piping hot breadsticks, or garlic knots, and you'll be living the good life. When you dine at Abby's, you're supporting local schools, charities, and events. We're family-owned and a little old-fashioned. Community means everything to us. If a child in your family is celebrating a birthday soon, let's throw a party together with free balloons, a free t-shirt, and a special birthday discount. We've been the go-to place for birthday parties for nearly 60 years. Head to Abby's.com or visit one of our clean, comfortable parlors. Delivery, takeout, or dine-in. Abby's, a legendary pizza tradition.
Hey, Carrie, we need that tax report by tomorrow. Hey, Bobby, get me that expenses.
For Hari's accounting firm, client growth is exponential.
We're a couple of accountants short.
He needs whip-smart accountants at whiplash speed.
Hey, so why aren't these receivables matching up?
Indeed can help him hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Instant Match instantly connects you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your sponsored job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
It's time. The countdown is on for your new ride for the new year from the new Hyundai Medford. New Hyundai SUVs, 2022 Konas, Tucson, or all new Santa Fe. Over 20 to choose from. All with 1.9% financing for 60 months. Plus, new Hyundais come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile Hyundai Advantage warranty. Or how about new to you? We have a great selection of used vehicles too. BMWs, Fords, Chevys, Toyotas, Nissan, GMC, and Ram trucks. Or maybe you just want cash. Well, we want your car. And yes, we pay cash. The green stuff. Dollar bills. Yes, we can pay you now. Bring it in and let's talk. New to you. Or cash for your car. Let's get you on a new ride this new year at Hyundai Medford. HyundaiMedford.com.
1.9% financing for 60 months on approved credit by Hyundai Motor Finance to well-qualified buyers. May not be combined with other offers. Offer ends 1/31/2022. See dealer for details.
You could save big when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, but when we just come out and say it, it feels like it falls a bit flat. So instead, we're going to have someone else say it. Because for some reason, when a random person talks about how great something is in a commercial, it's more believable.
I saved with a Progressive home and auto bundle.
And there you have it. I mean, I'm not sure why she's more believable than me, but either way, you get the point about the saving. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discount not available in all states or situations.
Hi, I'm Dr. Bradshaw of Premier Care Dental. Right now is the perfect time to keep your dental health on track and make sure that you are getting the most out of that smile of yours. We know that when you invest in your dental health, you will continue to benefit your overall health for years to come.
At Premier Care Dental, we offer world-class dentistry by professional and expert dentists at locations convenient to you. Do you have missing, failing, hurting, or broken teeth? Let Premier Care Dental give you a healthy smile and get the care you need at a price that is affordable to you without compromising on quality. Premier Care Dental also offers a complimentary consultation that includes an exam and x-rays, and if you mention this radio ad, you will receive your first implant for $9.90 or your first crown for $7.90. Restrictions apply, and all promotions depend upon your clinical exam. We also work with most insurance providers, or if you don't have insurance, at Premier Care Dental, we offer our own in-house savings plan that may help. Premier Care Dental has 4 Southern Oregon locations in Grants Pass, Ashland, Medford, and Klamath Falls. Call us today, 541-476-4583, and at premiercaredental.com.
This is your home for the Beavers.
Hit high and deep to left field. Back goes Coleman. It's on its way. So long.
KTMT 580 AM and K241CA 96.1 FM Ashland.
Your teams.
Hell, it is Barner. It is Barner, and he's gone. The Beavers are the national champions.
Brandon, a three-pointer out front. Hit it! Yes, he did!
His take.
Here's what I think.
Matt Bagley.
Let's talk about Theo Epstein, general manager of the Red Sox 20 years ago. And he helps Boston break the curse of the Bambino. Then he gets hired by the Cubs, helps them break the Billy Goat curse. They win the World Series. And now Theo Epstein has stepped away from baseball. I want to point out a hunch that I have about this. I have no evidence, I have no inside sources, but just basic glancing at who he is and what he's done, this looks an awful lot like a sabbatical.
Talking local sports.
You ever had a sabbatical? I've never had one in radio. My mom, a bridal seamstress. My dad has worked in the software industry. They've never got one. They've deserved one. A lot of people have deserved one. And I think Theo Epstein deserves one.
Southern Oregon Sports Talk with Matt Bagley. Presented by Medford BMW on 96.1 580 The Game.
Hour number 2 is going to be a little bit different. I have a podcast with ScoopDuck.com's Justin Hopkins, and here's what we talked about. Oregon has a brand new football coach. Before they got that coach, they lost their old coach, and 100 football players all had to ask themselves a very important question. Am I in the right place? Is Oregon the right place for me to develop my career? Some players said no. Robbie Ashford transferred out. Some players said maybe. They thought about it. They deliberated on it. And they let Dan Lanning talk to them about whether or not they want to stay at Oregon. So you've seen some players transfer out. You've seen some players stay. That is a fascinating development and one that I think could contribute to the Ducks' chances next year. If they keep players from transferring out, I think Oregon has a really good roster and a great coaching staff. They could be a force in the Pac-12. If guys transfer out, it's a different story. So we talk about that. We talk about recruiting and a whole lot more in the weekly podcast I put together with Justin Hopkins, Scoop Duck in Hi-Fi. Here's that podcast. Took a week off, then some crazy things happened, so we had to jump back in early this week. Scoop Duck at Hi-Fi. My name is Matt Bagley, joined as always by Justin Hopkins of On 3 and Scoop Duck. Let's start with the running back room, because if I were just gathering the headlines, I would say those are the two biggest headlines surrounding the Ducks. Travis Dye goes to USC. CJ Verdell goes pro. How do you feel about those moves, and how do they impact the Ducks?
Well, let's be real about this. Those are two highly productive players, right? I mean, they both were key parts of this Oregon offense for 3 or 4 years. Last 3 or 4 years, they've been a terrific duo. If one was injured, one would fill in. If they were both healthy, you'd see kind of the thunder lightning approach with the two of them. I know that Dye left a lot to be desired from the physical standpoint. He wasn't the biggest guy, wasn't the strongest guy, but he was highly efficient, highly effective, and one of the hardest players. I feel this way. I personally have no ill will towards Travis Dye, but the difference between the way the two are departing the program couldn't be a bigger difference. I think for CJ Verdell, going to the NFL, that's a guy that I think it's just being greedy to ask him to come back for another year. I don't know that there's that much that he could raise his NFL draft stock by coming back, other than possibly proving he could stay healthy for a season, which he's had trouble doing, so far at Oregon. That might be the only way that helps him, but that's a huge gamble. So going to the NFL, I don't think there's a Duck fan that faults him or is upset about that decision. Obviously, with Dye going to USC, that's a much more different manner. That's a much different way to exit the program. I think if Travis Dye had gone to Oklahoma or Alabama or Georgia or somewhere that's, on the cusp of being a national contender, not in the Pac-12, it might have been viewed a little more favorably. But for him to go to USC, a known rival, to Oregon, I think it does nothing but tarnish what should have been probably a really good legacy at Oregon. Great player, great family, loved what, Travis Dye done and Troy Dye had done with the program. But him making that decision alone certainly tarnishes his legacy at Oregon.
Yeah, I think it's a complicated thing, and you hit on this, of if he had gone somewhere else, fans would be a little less upset. I think about the fact that Travis Dye is from Southern California. He went to Norco High School, which is about 50 or 60 miles from the USC campus. And I think about the fact that he reportedly was looking into his NFL draft grades, right? Because if you're draft eligible, you can request a draft grade from 345 Park Avenue in New York City, the NFL headquarters, and then they'll shoot back anonymous grades from NFL teams and tell you basically an evaluation of where they think you're going to get drafted. I think that he went through those hoops, and the NFL came back and gave him a grade he probably didn't like, and he came to the decision, I should go somewhere else to, boost my exposure and be in big games. And I think the only part that I have trouble with is that he picked USC in that over some of those bigger schools you mentioned.
Yeah, and who knows, Alabama probably wasn't calling, neither was Georgia. To me, it again, I like just stripping away the fact that it's USC. Like if this was USC, 15 years ago with Pete Carroll there running the show and winning games and Rose Bowls and this and that,
right,
you could justify it. Yep. But I mean, they have not been a good football team. He committed a couple days after they took another running back out of the transfer portal. They took Austin Jones from Stanford, as well, just like a day or two before his announcement. It just leaves a really bad residue in a lot of Duck fans' mouth. And I am not going to sit here and tell you that that's not fair. I think that it's probably pretty fair, to feel that way. And I think more so because, you rewind this thing back to, we'll say about 6 years ago. I can't remember when Troy Dye was coming out of high school, but you have Oregon basically giving his older brother a shot, giving him a home, he has a great career at Oregon. Obviously makes his younger brother a priority, really does a lot of great things for the Dye family. And here you just kind of have him saying, nah, what feels like, I'm going to go to USC. And more than likely, this hasn't been confirmed. It's been reported, and it's been my suspicion that this has more to do with NIL money than it has to do with, wanting to be close to home or wanting to be on a contender or whatever, whatever you want to make the justification. And I don't fault the kid for, hey, look, if there's $100,000, I don't know. I'm just throwing out a number. If there's $100,000 on the table, being offered, maybe, and you realize that, your NFL, evaluation came back and you're not really looking all that hot in the NFL, maybe this is your best chance at getting some money to springboard you into your adult lifehood. I don't know. That certainly looks like that's what this is, and we're we can't confirm that, and I don't know. It's a bummer. I can't ever fault the kid for taking money. I can't blame him for being offered a good NIL contract if that's the case and taking it. it still doesn't change that doesn't change the fact that Duck fans shouldn't feel a little bit of sting. The two theories can be true. You could be upset that he went and did this, and he could really, have gone to USC for the NIL money, and it's probably honestly not the worst thing for him in his personal life.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head of he's a running back. He plays a position that even if he makes it to the next level, he's not going to have a great contract in that first deal out of the draft. And he's going to have to earn any money he gets at that level. There's a chance he gets hurt, and he never makes a second contract, never makes a big payday. So if you can get money now, chase it, right? If you can get money now, take the money now. I think as a human being, that's admirable. I think as a human being, him going back home, that's admirable. That's respectable. As a fan, this stings just because it's USC.
Yeah, because it's USC, it's been your rival. It's well documented. Oregon gave you a shot, brought you in, really did a good job of developing you under Jim Mastro. We have to give him the credit because he was here for it, and really made your career what it is now. And I don't think anybody truly faults you for cashing in on it, but I guess it would just. I have a tough time believing Oregon probably didn't at least make him some sort of an offer to stay. It would just be interesting to know what the difference in the numbers were, if any at all, and just, kind of a way to maybe justify how folks are feeling. But, I guess it is what it is. The great thing is that opens the door for, some of the young guys that are on there that I know the fans are super excited about. Gives them a chance for more carries to come in and have a bigger impact on this team this coming season. I guess when one door closes, another one opens somewhere else.
Yeah. A humongous hole on the offensive line will open up for Byron Cardwell to run through. My initial reaction to those departures is Cardwell is going to be the guy next fall. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, he showed some pretty good glimpses this year. I personally don't believe that he was ready to be the feature back all the way just yet. I think the role that he had where he was, sharing carries with Dye for the most part and getting some reps, I think that allowed him to stay fresh. I think it was a good change of pace, for the offense and made it difficult for the defense. I think all those things were helpful, to him. So he's going to need to step up to be the feature back this time around. And, that's going to be a different animal for him. So we'll just see how he fares in that role.
Yeah. Okay, so we know the Ducks lose those two running backs. How do you feel about the other departures that we've seen over the past couple weeks? They're just, Logan Sagapolu is the one off the top of my head that comes to mind. What do you do about a backup player, right? And it's right. You want to keep those guys around. You don't want to worry. You want to have time to develop them, and some of that other stuff that goes with it. But this was going to happen, right? I mean, this is what we expected to happen at Oregon. You expected a new coach to come in. You expected there to be some attrition, and I've got to be honest. I expected more attrition than there has been. You can't count. So Kingsley Sumataya, Micah Pittman, those were before the coaching change occurred. Those don't count to me per se. When you talk about DJ James and Jason Jones, you know what? Those two hurt. Those are guys that were, key parts of the defense. Yeah. DJ James was a starter. Jason Jones was showing a lot of promise. I know fans are really excited. At the end of the day, those two guys really wanted to go closer to home. They wanted to get back closer to home. They ended up at a school in their respective home state. I don't think anybody faults them for that. And to be perfectly honest, those two I would have a tough time believing would have stayed had Mario even remained at Oregon. So, again, I don't really put those two on this new coaching staff. As for Robbie Ashford, quarterback, we've all been talking about a quarterback leaving Oregon for a year and a half now. There's just so many young guys that are talented and are probably really looking for a place to play.
somewhere else. That again, just doesn't really surprise me. Trey Benson, obviously transferring to Florida State, a lot closer to home. Again, another backup reserve guy at the moment. So far, I think Coach Lanning's done a terrific job keeping this thing together because, I'm not going to go on record here of saying who, but there were a lot of other players' names floated my direction in the past month that, were at least considering, potentially transferring. And I know it took a lot of work by Coach Lanning and his staff to keep a lot of those guys at Oregon. And I think they did a tremendous job of keeping the key components of guys that you want at Oregon. I'll say this. I think Adrian Clem did an amazing job of keeping that offensive line group together and getting those guys back for one more year. In particular, TJ Bass, that guy I think would have actually probably worked his way into mid-round consideration. I think him coming back, he has the potential to go even higher next year. Mm-hmm. But I think that was probably tough, and I think that was a really good job by Coach Clem keeping him and Salah Amave at Oregon for another year.
Yeah, and this kind of hits on something we were talking about off air, recording this, but the coaching staff all come from different schools all across the country. And the players, obviously, they come from Eugene, Oregon, right? They've been at Oregon for X amount of years. They're used to a coaching staff that's no longer there. So on one side, you have a staff that doesn't really have a chemistry, doesn't really have a history with the players. And you have players that are thinking, the coach I came here for is gone. And there's this new guy. And so there's going to be tension. There are going to be players that say, I want to go elsewhere, or I want to go home, or I want to go closer to home. And I agree with you. I think the job that's been done by this new staff to win guys back with the Oregon program and build a rapport out of thin air over the last 3 or 4 weeks, that's really impressive.
Yeah, you use a really good term there, thin air. And I think that's applicable because, realistically, for the most part, you look at Adrian Clem, he's been in the NFL. You look at Tosh Lupoy, he's been in the NFL. You look at Drew Maringer, he's been at New Mexico. You look at Matt Pallage, he's been at Baylor. Dan Lanning was at Georgia. My point to all that is, and that's just some of them, a lot of these guys had virtually zero interaction with these guys, even as recruits, because they weren't on their radar. They weren't really recruiting them very hard. So, yeah, like you said, they're virtually bringing them in cold turkey and saying, hey, we're here now. Let's be buddies. You got to earn that trust. You've got to earn, the confidence that these are going to be good coaches and are going to have your best interest at heart. And, again, with the advancements of the transfer portal, it makes it harder and harder to keep these guys, at the school, even if there is no coaching change. So I think it really speaks volumes to how genuine Coach Lanning and some of his staff are and the vision that they have for this program.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I try to do this when we talk a lot. I think back of my experience in college, even though I wasn't a student athlete, but I think about how some of my neighbors in the dorms at OIT, they were from the Bay Area, or they were from Las Vegas, or they were from the East Coast, and they would get homesick, and some of them transferred out and left. They went back home. Or I think about how some students would sign on to go to OIT because they wanted to study a specific major with a specific professor, and if that professor leaves, you reevaluate what you want to do and who you want to learn from, right? And college football is not that different. These players signed up to play for one staff. They signed up to have a certain development path that is changed now because it's a different staff with a different vision. And so a lot of guys kind of had that moment, right? Is this the right place for me? Should I look elsewhere? And the fact that they were able to keep most of that team from saying, yeah, there is a better place for me elsewhere, or yeah, I really should go elsewhere to further my career. The fact that most of this team said, I trust Dan Lanning and I trust Adrian Clem and this staff to, have my best interest and my best development at heart. That's a huge win for Oregon this offseason.
Well, and I'll say this is something it's applicable to what we're talking about, but it's a little off tangent slightly, is the fact that I think all we've done now, and I would say that Oregon is a really is really one to showcase here. All we've done now with the addition of the transfer portal and making players immediately eligible is really shine the light on how often kids thought about transferring out 10 years ago. We've basically given them the opportunity to do it now. 10 years ago, I think there was way more kids that thought about transferring out of Oregon and other programs that never did because the transfer rules were so difficult. You had to sit for a year, whatever the case might be. So, really, if you left at the wrong time, it was almost like 2 years, right? And, basically with the creation of the transfer portal and the rules being changed now, I think all this does is shine the light on how often this happens and how often, I guess maybe that these kids would have transferred before if they had the means to. Am I a fan of it? Is it good for football? I don't really know. I don't feel like we know the long-term implications of this because on one hand, it's great for these kids to have the ability to go where they want to be within reason. I mean, I think if a kid's transferring 3 or 4 times, it's pretty clear that it's, the problem isn't the institution. It might be the player itself. But, we don't really have the data yet to know how good this is. I know it's made life miserable for coaches, for director of player personnel that are trying to manage, numbers and scholarship numbers. And it's definitely created a bit of a free agency vibe in college football. But again, going back to the crux of what I was trying to say, this really, I think, has shined a light on how often kids have thought about transferring out. And I think the biggest difference, in a lot of those cases is you'd have maybe a parent or a coach or somebody that a little older and wiser that might, hey, talk you into staying or kind of walk you through it. Say, hey, you're just going through a rough patch. It's close to the holidays. I know it's tough. Stick it out. And I think you have less and less of that now. It's like, hey, yeah, just put your name in the portal. It'll be fine. And I think it's fine for the, upper 2% of players that are jumping into the portal that, are immediately getting another home. But I think that a lot of these kids are getting bad advice because there's, 1,000, 1,200 plus names that are still in the portal with nowhere to go. And it's certainly something that's going to take some leveling off. I do feel that way.
Okay, so we've talked about transfers and NIL and just the mishmash of old coaches leaving, new coaches coming in, and how players have reacted to it. How are things on the recruiting front?
Yeah, a really, good question there. We're getting close to signing day. I do believe, something that I've maintained, Oregon only has a handful of spots. There really weren't that many players that left, via the transfer portal. I think if Mario Cristobal had stayed and signed the number of guys he was looking to sign, you would have saw, more attrition than you're seeing now through the coaching change. I think to back things up, maybe to even just start it off, I think the Ducks, this current staff, the new staff did really well, last week, getting a commitment from in-state wide receiver / athlete, Justice Lowe out of Lincoln. I think that's a really good looking player. About 6'1", 182 pounds, more than likely comes in as a wide receiver to play wide receiver for Oregon. With On3, who updated its 2022 rankings this week. He got a major bump up to number 133 overall in their rankings. So you see he's, now a top 150 level player. I think that was great for Oregon to go and snatch him, get another in-state guy. I always feel as though if you are Oregon and there's an in-state player that is pretty close to being that level of a take, I've always felt that a lot of those in-state guys tend to outperform simply because it means a little bit more for them playing for Oregon, having grown up in Oregon, having watched Oregon. Their parents are going to be at, maybe every home game or most home games. Their family, their friends, their cousins, are going to get to come watch them play. I think it means a little bit more for them. So a guy like Justice Lowe that we'll just say might be a fringe type player, I think it's smart to save him. It looks good from an optic standpoint. And I just think they end up being, players that kind of outpunch their weight, and for that matter, Justin Herbert comes to mind, in-state kid. Brady Breeze is another one that comes to mind. I think even though it's been up and down, I think another guy that comes to mind is Alex Forsythe that's currently on the roster. In-state kids, it just tends to mean a little bit more, and I think there's value there. Additionally, they picked up a commitment just the day before that from Kavika Rogers out of Hawaii, a big, old, massive 6'5", 6'6", 275-pound offensive lineman. Just kind of a raw, big, not even a blob of Play-Doh because the kid actually carries very little extra weight on his body. Just a really good-looking specimen that I think Adrian Clem's pretty excited to get on campus and start working with. And again, you didn't need a ton of help on the offensive line, so that's kind of a nice pickup late there. So I think Oregon's done well there. They haven't lived in the transfer portal. You did Bo Nix, you did Sam Taimani, defensive line, you did Christian Gonzalez, a defensive back. They might end up taking one or two more guys out of the transfer portal, but I do like that they haven't just made a living off the transfer portal, because I believe if you do that, it sets you up for difficulty with your scholarship numbers in the future in the next 2 to 4 years. So I think maybe in this year you get a couple stop gaps, but I would imagine that Coach Lanning, does a little bit less and a little bit less on the transfer portal moving forward. So from recruiting there, all of that's going well. The commitments have been great. There was a great visitor list of guys that visited this past weekend. Safety / cornerback Kamari Terrell, one of the fastest players in the country out of Texas, visited. I think the Ducks are in the driver's seat there. I think things are looking good. Georgia running back commit Jordan James. Here we are talking about running backs earlier. They had Jordan James, who's committed to Georgia but didn't sign with them. He visited. Again, I'm sure it went really well for him. I think the one that we really got to be watching, though, is Colorado running back transfer Jarek Broussard. He took an official visit to Oregon. There's obviously the connection with Coach Demetrius Martin, who came over from Colorado. He's a smaller guy, 5'9", 5'10", around 175 pounds. So very similar to, Dye, who elected to go to USC. So I think, you've somewhat found a plug and place kind of guy there. And then Jalen David Robinson was the other official visitor for Oregon this past weekend, a defensive back also out of Texas. I think Coach Pallage has done a really good job there. What I like about JDR is the fact that he could play all three positions in the back end, meaning safety, nickel, and corner. And again, another speedster that can fly. So, that's the list there that visited this past weekend. You and I are obviously recording this on a Tuesday. As it looks like Oregon will have at least 6 official visitors coming this weekend. And just to kind of rabble through them, it's, Jaleel Florence, who's been at Oregon before, was a one-time commit. That's USC and Oregon. Getting him on campus is huge. Trajan Williams is committed to Oregon. Looks as though he'll sign with almost no problems there. In-state kid. Amarian Winston, the linebacker edge player that was one-time committed to Oregon, also visited Florida. He's expected to visit this weekend officially. We'll see if the Ducks push to get him back in the fold. Andrew Paul is a running back out of Texas who's become one of the hottest names in the 2022 recruiting cycle. Clemson, Georgia, LSU, a lot of the heavyweights have come in and offered late. So, again, we keep on that. They were obviously prepping for some of this running back work as they've been, hosting guys. We'll call it wide receiver / tight end Arlis Boardingham. Also recently visited Florida, is expected to visit Oregon this weekend. We'll see if the Ducks make a push there. And then lastly is recent commit Justice Lowe, out of Lincoln, Portland, Oregon, Lincoln High School. He will visit Oregon as well.
Lake Oswego, but
Lake Oswego, yeah.
Yeah.
My mistake. Yeah, Lake Oswego. My mistake.
Well, it's understandable. I mean, the Ducks do have a Lincoln tie because I'm pretty sure that's where Don Johnson coached before he was in Oregon. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah. But anyways, in-state kids. So, yeah, that's what the list is looking like so far. That's the official visit stuff. I'm not going to go over the unofficial visit stuff because I know, Oregon had, about 36 kids on campus that were unofficial visitors from the, 2023, 24, and 25 classes, some big names. And they'll do that once again this weekend, hosting, I would wager somewhere in the 24 territory, unofficial visitors. And again, those would be guys from all over the country in the 2023, 24, and 25 classes. So lots happening, lots moving. Recruiting's, hot and heavy, which is fun. That's where I make my, butter my bread. So I'm happy to have that news flowing right now.
Yeah, you butter your bread there, and apparently so does this coaching staff because they're grinding right now. You mentioned Justice Lowe, the 6'1" wideout, and he also plays corner as well for Lake Oswego. I want to talk about him for a minute because I think it's a similar story to something we see not every year with Oregon, because they have the luxury. They don't have to recruit in-state. They don't have to, recruit 3-star guys either. But you see either fans will complain about, well, the in-state kid got priority treatment or preferential treatment because he's in-state, or the 3-star kid is not really, capable of playing at the next level, and, so-and-so can't scout, yada, yada, yada. You'll hear that from time to time. I think with Justice Lowe, it's not true, right? Like he's a 3-star on 24/7 Sports, but he's got offers from multiple Pac-12 schools. He's got an offer from Notre Dame. Obviously, he's got the offer from the Ducks. And if you watch his game, he's not just a touchdown guy, right? Like at the high school level, there are tons of receivers that you can throw them a screen pass and they can take it 70 yards because they're just too big, too fast, too good for that level. I've seen him up close and personal, watched him against Sheldon in September, watched him against South Medford a few weeks later, and this is a young man that even when he doesn't get the football, he can block. And what I love is on the defensive side of the ball, obviously they're not throwing him the football. He's a corner, but I've seen him go up and show ball skills. I've seen him go up, track down the football, make a deflection, or make a pick. And I think that's a skill that translates really well at the next level.
Well, it's useful, right? I mean, one of the greatest things about, like Johnny Johnson, for instance, that played at Oregon was all the other things that he did, not just catch footballs or catch touchdowns. It was the blocking. It was, being a very selfless player. Oregon has definitely had its share of good luck, with players like that have played that way. And you mentioned a guy like Justice Lowe. He's going to come in, and let's just say he's not even a starter, right? He doesn't come in. If he comes in and goes to practice and he's the guy that's out there, making that extra block and doing these other things, and he hears from, Coach Junior Adams, hey, good job, Justice, whatever. Those other guys that might be starting are going to be like, hey, I better pick up, my blocking. I better start doing some of this intangible stuff, or, this guy's going to start taking, snaps away from me. So again, it elevates your room. It completes your room. One of the things that I hate is when, and this could be really any room, but when your running back room or your wide receiver room or your quarterback room, for example, all have the same guy. Like you've got 3 or 4 of the same guy. You've all your running backs are 5'10", 200 pounds, or all your receivers are, 6'4", 225 pounds. Don't get me wrong. You want some of those guys in your room, but you don't want all of the same, types of guy in your room. And I think Justice Lowe is like you said, kind of just that different weapon in there. Then, and no disrespect to, Dante Thornton, or Troy Franklin. Those guys are terrific players, but, Justice Lowe brings a little something different to the table, and I think that's great for the room.
Yeah. Yeah, and I say this, obviously I'm way too in the weeds here. You're talking with somebody that high school football in Oregon is my day job. It's what I focus on. It's what I know really well. Steve Curry, the longtime head coach at Lake Oswego, I have long been of the belief he is the best football coach in Oregon. So, and this is not to knock other recruits from other states, but there's a huge difference between you play for your hometown team in some suburb in SoCal and the coach is just another guy versus you got 4 years with Steve Curry. I've always seen his Lake Oswego teams play smart, play very well coached, well prepared, and I think that gives him a huge advantage at the collegiate level. Having that step up in competition and that step up in expectation from his coaches.
Yeah, like you said, it's nice to, when you're a college coach and you bring in a player from the high school level, and if they're used to a rigorous, training program or rigorous practice or maybe even, kind of a coach that might be a little hard-nosed, if you will.
Right.
It certainly makes their jobs easier. They're appreciative of it versus somebody that comes in with bad practice habits and bad training habits. And like you said, it definitely, again, Junior Adams should be very pleased with Justice Lowe once he gets on campus and be able to get the most out of him for sure.
Yeah. It also kind of reminds me with the 3-star that he has with 24/7. I remember when Brandon Buckner went through this. Do you remember that? Do you remember all the flack on your site of people fighting over whether or not Brandon Buckner was going to be a good player?
Oh yeah. And then, I mean, it's every year. It's every year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then you go back to September 11th, 2021, Ducks go to Columbus. I don't think they win that game without some of the plays Brandon Buckner made in the fourth quarter. And that's a 3-star guy.
Yeah. I mean, there's terrific 3-stars, all over the place. And again, I think one of the things that probably made, Buckner a nice pickup for Oregon is the fact that, his dad is a defensive line coach, coaches in the NFL. Whether he was getting the proper training at practice every day, he was certainly getting it at home. His dad was working with them, probably preached, the value of hard work. And again, so there's a guy that Joe Salavea had show up on campus, at least, for so far. And, wasn't a guy that he had to bring him up to speed and give him the tough love. That was probably a guy that started pushing some of the vets a little bit. And, again, there's a lot of value for having those guys on your roster for sure.
Yeah. We're talking about transfers, talking about recruiting today as well. I don't think I mentioned the other big fish when we talk about in-state guys. Here's one that was in-state, and then he went to L.A. for a couple of years playing for Chip. Now he's in the portal. How do you feel about the Ducks in the Chase Cota sweepstakes?
Yeah, certainly interesting, right? I mean, here's how I feel about Oregon and taking a receiver from the transfer portal. It's a delicate situation. You got a couple of young guys there that you don't want to lose, in Thornton and Franklin. You've got Chris Hudson. You've got some guys that have been pretty good for you. And again, they're all fairly young. That room's fairly young for the most part. I think it's a delicate situation where if you are going to take a receiver out of the transfer portal, it has to be the right guy. It either needs to be a surefire, home run. This guy, no doubt, we got to take him. And I think in the case of Chase Cota, that is a really easy sell to that room. Here's a kid that grew up in the state of Oregon. Here's a kid whose dad played at the University of Oregon and then went to the NFL. Here's a kid whose cousin just recently left Oregon. Some of those players currently on the roster will obviously still have a relationship with Brady Breeze. So I think in terms of telling this to the younger group, hey, here, we are going to bring this guy in. It makes a lot of sense to bring in Chase Cota, who has a ton of ties to the program, who probably should have been in Oregon from the jump start, versus bringing some guy in that, played football at Auburn or, you pick your random school that nobody has a relationship with or doesn't have any ties to Oregon. So I think a guy like Cota, does he come in and and blow this thing wide open? Probably not, but he's got great hands. He has a knack for finding the soft spots in the defense and getting open. He's a guy to me that when it's 3rd and 4 and you absolutely need, those 4 yards, and you need to make sure that when you throw this ball, the receiver or the tight end or whoever's going to catch it, I think Cota fits that profile really well. So I think there's a place on this team for him. I think the Ducks are probably, I don't want to say they're the team to beat. I know Washington State and a lot of other schools, ASU, a lot of other schools around the conference have reached out with a ton of interest. I think Notre Dame's another one that's reached out with a ton of interest.
Right.
But I think you obviously have to give Oregon a pretty serious chance to land Chase Cota, and I think it does serve as a lot of value to this team as well.
Yeah, the pride of South Medford High School, and of course you hit the nail on the head. His father was a part of a great era of Duck football, Chad Cota, and Chase was recruited by UCLA, where he committed to, but also Notre Dame, so they're back in the hunt. Recruited by Oregon as well, but that was the Willie Taggart year, so he had some other options and took them. I am really excited by the possibility that young man can come home, because just getting to meet him over the past few years and know about him, and he's a music major at UCLA and kind of sees the world in a different way. I love the idea of him meshing in that locker room as somebody that's different than a lot of other kind of jock football players. I just love the idea of him being in that locker room, being a great chemistry guy, and then making an impact on the field, like you said, someone that's reliable on 3rd down. I think about someone that's reliable in the run game. I saw him make some awesome blocks against LSU in that surprise win the Bruins had in August, and I think about the things he has in his game that you can't coach, right? Like, we know he's fast, we know he can catch, we know he can cut, but he does all of it at 6'5". Like, you can't coach that.
Yeah. No, and again, something I mentioned, a little bit ago that I'll circle back on. I love when there's, a player from in-state and you bring him home. So we both know that Chad Cota will probably go watch all of Chase's home games this season at Oregon. You might get Brady Breeze back, in between if he's playing or whatever he's got going on to come and watch. They'll have a ton of family in the stands. Watching, and that to me, as a player, when you walk out of the field and you know that you've got 10 family members up in the stands, that's that little extra motivation that you need that certainly helps. And so, I just think there's a ton of value in bringing Chase Cota to Oregon.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to be the guy, right?
No,
he doesn't. It's not like you're counting. Oh man, we're counting on Chase Cota to be our number 1 receiver, and if he isn't, it's a major fail. You're not. You're counting on him to mesh in with that group, add a veteran presence to that group, and be probably one of your like realistically be one of your top 3 or 4 receivers, and he'll have a lot. He'll get plenty of snaps. His snap count will be high, but again, it's not like, if Chase Cota doesn't catch 10 balls and, go for 150 yards, we're going to lose the game. That's not the case, which is a good problem to have.
Right. Like if you were building this offense around a weapon, I think the weapon is Troy Franklin. And everyone else in the receiving core, there's an opportunity for them, but it's a specialized role. They aren't going to be the guy that's demanding the bracket coverage. They aren't going to be the guy that's the primary read on a play. But when the defense covers a Troy Franklin, a Chase Cota has opportunities.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're constantly trying to create mismatches for the defense, and I think that this is another tool for Coach Dillingham to do that.
Yeah, if they get him. And then,
if they get him, yeah.
Is there anything else football-wise that you want to hit on before we finally give some much-needed love and attention to the teams on the hardwood?
Nope, I think it's time to give them their dues for sure.
Okay, so between Mario leaving, then Dan Lanning coming in, and the national championship game, I don't think we've talked Oregon basketball for a month. A ton has changed. Wins over top 5 teams, a blowout, an embarrassing rout over a rival. How do you feel about Dana Altman and his incredible Oregon men's basketball team?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I was talking to Jared, this morning, Jared Denny, who does a lot of the team writing coverage for us on Scoop Duck. And, everybody knows that football is what butters everybody's bread, not just mine, but the universities, and not just at Oregon, all over. Football is king, right? Yeah. But, fans, I feel as though fans are paying attention to Oregon football, and then, the bowl game's done. And so then they stay tuned in to, the remaining bowl games and the, the national championship game. And then those are done. And just then do you actually finally start looking at basketball. I mean, let's be real. I know there's some diehard basketball fans in here, so I'm not crapping on basketball. Okay. Right. I enjoy it, but let's be real. It gets a very limited amount of your attention until college football is all the way done. And then let's be real, even more so. Oregon was playing like crap. You probably really weren't wanting to pay attention. Even in some of the wins, they were ugly wins, and just, I'll admit it. I will admit it. For the first time, honestly, for the first time in years, I had my doubts that Dana Altman was going to turn this thing around. Just watching this team, seeing the lack of chemistry, seeing a bunch of kind of me first players on the court, not really gelling, not playing what I would just call Dana Altman basketball. I didn't think they were going to get there this year. And then for whatever reason, it clicked. It's obviously clicked. Like, it's not just, I'm not just saying that. These last 3 games for men's basketball have been incredible. I mean, the sweep of the Los Angeles schools that were, number 3 and number 5 respectively at the time. And then you absolutely just demolished Washington. And it's not that you just, that like you got lucky and they had injuries. No, you kicked the crap out of them because you played damn good basketball. Mm-hmm. It's cool and it's exciting and it's funny because, talking to Jared this morning, it's like, we probably better start covering basketball a lot more because people are definitely, paying a lot more attention now, as they should. And I couldn't be more excited about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And you know me, I love going, beneath the curtain on a sports media job. So I'll use that to tie in here. But I know for me on the radio side, I will get phone calls and text messages all year, any time of the year, about Marcus Mariota, right? Are the Raiders going to start him, or where should he go, and how do you feel about, this part of his career? I will get phone calls and text messages about Chip Kelly or Mario Cristobal or now this new staff with Dan Lanning all year, any time of the year. And it's just a testament to the weight that football fandom has, right? Like, there's a reason for this podcast. We always start with football, and we always spend the majority of our time with football. There's a reason on your site most of the comments are about football, and there's a reason on Twitter, right? Oregon Duck Twitter, all the fans out there, they're talking about football too. It's king. It's the most important sport, not just at Oregon, but I think in the minds of fans across the country. The number 1 sport in America, pretty clearly, and so it's tough to switch gears. Like, I know some fans, like you say, that they'll tune into basketball in January. I know some fans that won't tune into basketball until March, and. Right. And I think with this team, you're realizing the error of that approach. You need to watch what they're doing, because they pulled off something 2 weeks ago that has literally never, ever been done in the entire history of the Pac-12. There had never been a 2-game road stand against 2 top 5 opponents where the underdog traveling on the road beat both of those top 5 teams. John Wooden's UCLA teams never did that. Now, maybe it's because they never needed to. I think about like Mike Montgomery when he was at Stanford and Cal, never needed to do that, never did that. I think about all the great coaches that have come through the Pac-12 over decades. That's never happened until now. And that's amazing on its own. Then you just watch the way they played against Washington the other night. And like you said, you see a team that has chemistry. They're playing unselfish basketball. You say it's Dana Altman's basketball. I almost say it's better than the Altman style because you have big men now contributing on both ends. And contributing not simply as a defensive stopper or a rebounder, like, say, how Kenny Wooten would have contributed a couple years ago, but I'm seeing Oregon big men contribute on offense, and I see a much more balanced approach 1 through 5, utilizing size and length and speed and shooting. I think this Oregon team can make a run in the Pac-12, and I think this Oregon team can make a run in March.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're built that way. And like you said, yeah, I mean, it's a different style of Dana Altman ball. I mean, you're right. But I mean, the selfless, the some of those things that are a staple of all his teams, they're shooting a little bit less from 3, which I'm totally okay with because it was kind of a live by the 3, die by the 3,
yep.
Sort of an offense there. And yeah, like you said, with having multiple big men, they're able to play, dynamic. They're able to play versatile basketball. It's just fun to watch. They're giving a lot of effort on the defensive side of the ball, which I think was one of their, biggest Achilles early on. I think the shot selection early on in the season was terrible. A lot of guys were forcing shots, and it felt like they were just trying to get their points. And it no longer feels like that. It feels like they're comfortable giving up the ball, recognizing when somebody's in a better spot to score. For the team. And again, this last couple of weeks has been historic for men's basketball. It's certainly put them on the map. And I think the only thing that can honestly slow them down at the moment is how many games end up being canceled.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll cross our fingers and hope that doesn't happen. On the women's side of things, Kelly Graves' ladies get a big win over Arizona. They were in the national championship game last year, so that's a statement for the Ducks. How do you feel about them going forward?
Yeah, hitting their stride. Obviously didn't per se have the monumental week that the men did, but again, they're getting healthy. You're seeing the girls coming back out there. They're starting to gel better, and I feel like I'm going to the well again, but they're starting to play Kelly Graves basketball, right? They're running up and down the court. They're getting their points. I think one of the things that's often overlooked about a Kelly Graves team is they play really good defense. They play, really sound defense most of the time, and I think they're back to doing that. You look at most of their opponents right now, and they're, in the 50s and 60s. And I understand women, tend to score a little bit less as a whole, versus the men. But, like you said, you played a really good Arizona team that was number 7 at the time and beat them in overtime. You played a UConn team that was ranked number 9 and actually put a pretty good hurt on them. And, once again, beating Washington, that's always fun to beat Washington, no matter how good or bad they are or where they're ranked. So, yeah, they seem to be also hitting their stride and clicking at the right time. And, that's almost, well, I mean, it's tough to say this, but it might be kind of refreshing to see that maybe a Kelly Graves-led team is starting to peak at the right time versus like just being hot all season long. You know what I mean? That's how they've been in the past. And this year, they weren't hot to start, largely due to injury, but now they're certainly starting to peak at the right time. I would wager that this is one of the teams that most teams around the country isn't wanting to play right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not just Kelly Graves, and it's not just that they're avoiding the injury bug compared to the way they were just decimated by injuries last season, but I think it's the players. You don't want to go up against Nayara Sabali. She's going to play in the next level, WNBA, next year for sure. You definitely don't want to go up against Sedona Prince when she's playing and healthy and at her best. I'll borrow the same thing I said for the men. I think this team can, if they stay healthy, they can make a run in March.
Oh, absolutely. Because you're right, especially, and I will say especially for a women's team, they're versatile. They have size. Yeah. They have girls that can run the floor and shoot. That's something that, we've seen some of the elite teams in women's college basketball have in the past. That really Oregon, didn't have. They had some good interior players, but not to the caliber that they do now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're at a good stopping point here. Is there anything else you want to hit on?
I don't think so. I'm glad we were able to talk, about the men's and women's basketball because it definitely deserved its due. Again, I know maybe there were some fans that follow it along, but by and large, the interest has definitely peaked in the last 2 weeks. So it'll be fun to start covering them a little bit more and more moving forward. And we also have at least one more really good week of recruiting. So excited for that as well.
Okay, that was the podcast I taped with Justin Hopkins, scoopduck.com. We talked a lot about college football, and I know what you're thinking. Matt, I don't care. Matt, that's not my team. Matt, let's talk about the NFL. Here's what's great about my radio show. I have a full, free, wide open 2 hours with you tomorrow, and you can bet we're going to talk a ton about pro football. 2 hours tomorrow, 4 to 6 right here. Who's going to the Super Bowl? Simple question. It's got a long answer and a lot of answers. We'll break them all down tomorrow, 4 o'clock, right here.